life was full of regrets. Thinking back, there were just so many things you could have done, and at this very moment, your biggest regret was leaving. You couldn't help but wonder if things would have turned out differently if you stayed by his side instead of leaving him vulnerable to the manipulation of others. You were too young back then. The deaths of multiple loved ones was just too much for you to handle. So when your parents decided to move to Hokkaido, you gladly followed. At the age of 27, you realized just how selfish that decision was. But who can blame you? No one makes perfect decisions at the age of 16. If you knew that Tokyo Manji Gang would turn into one of the biggest criminal organizations in Japan in 11 years, you never would have left his side. After you left Tokyo, you quit being a delinquent. Back when you were with the Tokyo Manji Gang, your parents would always complain about you and ask you to be normal. At the time, you had no idea what they meant. You were surrounded by delinquents, and that was the normal life to you. It wasn't until you moved to Hokkaido that you realized that you were wrong and learned how to lead what they called a normal life. Nonetheless, even after 11 years of being a normal kid, going to college and graduating with good grades, you still had it in you. The hot-blooded temper, the determination to remove anything standing in your path, and the ability to stand your ground in the face of death. You still had it all. Even with 7 full-grown, deadly mafias pointing their guns at you, you didn't even bat an eyelash. You kept your gun pointed at the man standing in front of you. He stared at you through those silver-framed glasses, his hands in the pockets of his black and white striped suit. His short brown hair was gelled to the side. He looked very different from how you remembered him, but you'll never forget those cold, power-hungry eyes. You always wondered back then why he bothered you deep down, but now, you knew. "Put the gun down," Kisaki Tetta said calmly. His eyes were confident, like he knew you wouldn't pull the trigger. "Where's Mikey?" you demanded. You had been searching for Mikey for months, but even after visiting countless old friends, none of them knew where Mikey is. You got the same answer from all of them, and that is that they haven't seen him in over a year, and that Kisaki Tetta was the acting commander of Tokyo Manji Gang. Why didn't you realize this sooner? Way back then when Baji died, you should have figured it out. Kisaki was the enemy. Every muscle in your body wanted to pull the trigger and blow his head off, but you knew that he was the only one right now that could bring you to Mikey. "If I told you that I have absolutely no idea, would you believe me?" Kisaki asked. "Take me to him." You couldn't believe anything that came out of Kisaki's mouth. Part of you knew that Mikey was strong, and that there was no way he could be in any sort of danger. But another part of you feared. What if Kisaki locked Mikey up and took his place? If nobody saw Mikey for the past year, then nobody can prove that Mikey is alive and safe, right? "I told you, I don't know where he is. Now put the gun down," Kisaki said. You stepped closer, now the gun muzzle touching his forehead. "Sir!" his subordinates exclaimed with worry. Kisaki put a hand up, signaling for them to lower their guns. "Take me to Mikey!" You bit down on every single word. Even though you left Tokyo soon after Kisaki joined the gang, he still remembered you too well to underestimate you. You were always the wildest one. You weren't afraid of getting hurt, and you were known to return the favor tenfold. He knew you weren't afraid to kill him, and the only reason you won't is because you need him to bring you to Mikey. If there was one weakness about you, it was that you were too emotional. Back then, he easily used that trait of yours to cause conflict between other gangs, and that led to the death of multiple friends. However, after 11 years, now you were all adults, he wasn't so sure if you would be as easily manipulated as you used to be. Very well, Kisaki said after a deep breath. His men led you to his car. You kept your gun pointed to Kisaki the whole time, holding him as hostage. While you were in his car, gazing at the night view of Tokyo, you couldn't help but notice everything looked so different from how you remembered. The ramen shop you used to eat at with Mikey was replaced by a Starbucks. The old street full of little shops was now a big shopping mall. Mikey used to take you on the back of his CB205T, riding at night on this road when he needed to cool his head. You remembered how he'd let you hug his waist, and you'd lay your head on his back. You often went on midnight rides back then, especially after Draken and Baji were killed. It would just be the two of you. He'd take you to the side of Tokyo Bay, where the two of you would sit silently against the bike, mourning for the loss of your friends. It was there that Mikey grabbed your hand and interlocked his finger with yours. Mikey? You turned your head to him, and there he was, looking down at you. He pulled your hand to his lap, rubbing the back of your hand with his thumb. Don't leave me, okay? Your eyes immediately started watering at his words. Your lips quivered, a knot in your throat. You squeezed his hand and leaned your head on his shoulder. I'll never leave you. As tears trickled down your cheeks, you felt something gently caress your face, slowly lifting it up. Your eyes widened as his face slowly leaned in. The streetlight behind him casted a shadow on his face, making it impossible for you to see his expression. But the next thing you knew, his lips were on yours. That was 12 years ago, but you still remembered how fast your heart beat back then, and how his arms snaked around your waist, pulling you closer. You could never forget your first kiss. Both of you were young and clueless, letting your hormones and instincts take over your body. Your kisses were sloppy, and his teeth hit yours multiple times, but neither of you cared. Without having to say it out loud, the two of you confirmed your feelings for one another. Yet at the time, neither of you knew that in less than a year, you would break that promise. Even now, you hated yourself for that. Even though Mikey was the one who was obviously in more pain, you were too drowned in your own self-pity to see it. If you could time travel, you just want to go back and smack your 16-year-old self in the face. The drive was over an hour long. In that hour, you reminisced all the little moments you had while you dated Mikey. Oh, how you've missed him. You missed the way he hugged you by the waist and laid his chin on your shoulder. You missed the way he laid his head to your chest as you rubbed his back. You missed how you always fought back to back against the delinquents that dared to piss the two of you off. You missed simply having him by your side. We're here. Kisaki's voice snapped you out of your thoughts. During this whole time, you stuck the muzzle of the gun right against him, and even as you got out of the car, you didn't loosen your grip on the gun or the bastard. When you found yourself in front of a half-finished construction building, every cell in your brain was telling you this was a trap, and that you should finish Kisaki off right away. But something in your gut told you that Mikey was indeed here. Kisaki's driver led the two of you inside. You kept one hand around Kisaki's throat and the other holding the gun to his temple. You told yourself that if anything happens, you'll blow his head and then your own. That's the last thing you can do for Mikey. As you climbed the stairs, you could feel it inside, that you were getting closer to him. Yet, when you finally saw him, there was still a sense of surprise. When your eyes met, it was as if time had stopped. For a split second, what you saw wasn't the adult man wearing a long khaki trench coat with blonde slick-back hair, but the young teenage boy who liked to tie the top of his wavy shoulder-length blonde hair back. 11 years brought maturity to both of your faces, but at that moment, both of you saw only the young teenager you each fell in love with. Mikey. The name you have uttered in your dream finally reached the ear of the person it belongs to. Mikey's eyes landed on you, and then at the gun you held.
"What's the meaning of this?"
he asked.
Mikey, they've been working with the cops to investigate us. They already interfered with 2 of our deals. We need to get rid of them right now.
Kisaki interrupted.
Shut your damn mouth!
You shouted at the man in your hands. Your index finger tightened around the trigger, and you could feel Kisaki tense up in your hands.
Mikey, is this what you envisioned 15 years ago when we created Toman?
Mikey stood silently. He was never the type who liked to interject when other people talked. Your jaws tightened as you recalled the day Toman was created, the promises you guys made at the shrine.
All for one, and one for all. That was the kind of place you promised to make. You said you didn't like the way delinquents acted, and you looked up to how it was back then when Shinichiro Nichan led the Black Dragons. But look at Toman now. This isn't the Toman we created anymore.
You waited for Mikey to say something as tears streamed down your cheeks. Your eyes pleaded for him to say something, and you searched desperately for that dazzling young boy who had stars and ambition in his eyes. He used to look at you with the gentlest, warmest eyes. Now, they were cold and clouded. You couldn't see any hint of emotion in them. You never knew that one day he would become so foreign to you, almost like a stranger.
It's all because of him!
You shoved the gun harder into Kisaki's temple.
Mikey, I met up with Chifuyu. He's been investigating Kisaki for years. We found out that Kisaki was the one who was behind everything. He set Pachin up to get him into juvie. He was the one behind Kenchan's death. He was the mastermind behind Valhalla. He convinced Kazutora to kill Keisuke. He killed all of our friends, Mikey!
And he uttered after a long silence. Did you come all this way just to tell me that? Eyes widened in disbelief. You nearly lost grip on Kisaki and the gun. Your lips quivered for minutes before you could choke out. Mikey? For some reason, the corners of your lips started tugging upward, like you heard some kind of sick joke. Did you not hear what I said?
This guy killed our friends, Mikey! He's using you!
Using? Ha! What a joke! I'm Mikey's most loyal partner, unlike someone who ran away all those years ago.
Kisaki scoffed.
Shut up! You know exactly why I left! You were the one who killed her! And if I didn't leave, surely your next target would have been me! You purposely wiped away every person who could influence Mikey! Also, you can manipulate him! You ruined Mikey!
You were on the verge of pulling the trigger. You have to kill him. You need to kill him. Only if you kill him, Mikey will be free. You can't let this demon make use of Mikey anymore. Your eyes widened, and your body froze as you felt a hot liquid substance spread all over your back, staining the clothes you wore. Kisaki jerked himself out of your grip, backing away into the crowd of mafias who shielded him. You turned your head around slowly as blood trickled down the corners of your mouth. Behind you was a man with long pink hair and scars on the corners of his mouth. He pointed a gun at you, and there was smoke coming out of the muzzle of that freshly fired gun. Sansu. You recognized the old friend. You saw no remorse in his eyes, no sign of sadness or guilt whatsoever. Like what he shot right now wasn't a human, but a cockroach or a rat. You turned back to face Mikey. For the first time since you walked in here, Mikey finally showed some expression on his face. Was it shock? Or maybe just realization? He stared at you wide-eyed, like he didn't expect this to happen. Once again, you saw that little boy. All your memories with him began to flash before your eyes. You recalled the day you two first met.
No, I don't wanna go.
You were crying and screaming, making a big fuss as your parents dragged you to the Sano dojo. Sending you to the dojo was somewhat their version of sending you to the daycare. At merely 4 years old, you weren't ready yet to leave the side of your parents. You cried and cried, trying to run away, but once you saw the little kid, just as tiny as you, making a flying kick onto the strike shield held by a grown man, you were mesmerized. For the first time in your life, there was someone you wanted to be like. Noticing where your attention was fixated, the master of the dojo called the little boy over.
Manjiro, come meet your new friend.
The little boy walked over to you, his eyes giving you a quick scan up and down, like he was judging you. You held your breath as you waited for his judgment nervously. Suddenly, he smiled. It was a cute, close-eyed smile, one that lit the room like the sun.
I'm Manjiro. Let's be friends.
My... Blood dripped onto the concrete ground. You felt weak all over, but you took tiny steps towards the blonde man. That's right, the two of you were childhood friends, along with Baji. You went to elementary school with Mikey, and that's how the two of you met Draken together on your way home from school. Ever since way back then, Mikey had been obsessed with sweets. Your parents both worked, and often left you alone, so to make it up to you, your mom always packed you a lot of sweets and snacks. You always had lollipops in your backpack back in elementary school. Originally, you just gave the flavors you didn't like to Mikey, but gradually, as your interest in sweets lessened, you just gave everything to Mikey.
Hey, you still have any more lollipops? I just finished mine.
Mikey would shout to you as you guys got out of school.
Again? You know you shouldn't eat that much, or you'll get cavities.
You nagged at him, but still dug through your backpack for the other one. You handed him the other lollipop lying in your backpack, and he just grinned at you with that adorable cheeky grin of his.
大丈夫、大丈夫。俺はちゃんと歯磨くんだから。もうしょうがないね。
Your lips curved upward at the memory. Those were the best days. Shinichiro was alive, and the two of you just went around different elementary schools to beat up whoever picked a fight. Adults never made a big deal about fist fights amongst elementary school students, and simply brushed it off as kid fights. But when the two of you got to middle school, fighting was no longer tolerated, and kids like you and Mikey were branded as delinquents. Even as a middle school student, Mikey was still obsessed with sweets. Even though you no longer carried around that gigantic hard-case backpack you had back in elementary school that held all your stuff, you still had the habit of carrying around snacks that Mikey liked in your pockets. You loved the excited and surprised face he always makes when you pull out a snack out of nowhere. To him, it was like magic, when in reality, you just sewed a ton of inner pockets to your clothes. You remembered how you, Draken, and Mikey would just be walking along the streets, heading over to meet up with your friends after school was over, and Mikey would suddenly let out a loud, "Ah!"
What now?
Draken would turn around impatiently, because he already had an idea of what Mikey was making a fuss about.
I finished my dorayaki.
Mikey would wave his empty hands in the air, and his eyes would sparkle at you, because he knows you would probably have more.
Jeez, Mikey. Again?
You chuckled as you walked over to him.
Don't encourage him. You know he won't be able to finish his dinner if you keep feeding him those sweets.
Draken hissed at you. You giggled as you pulled out a handkerchief from your pocket.
Don't worry, Ken-chan. I kept count of how many he's had today.
You said as you wiped the red bean paste off the corner of Mikey's lips. The blonde boy grinned at you, just like a kid. As you and Mikey got older, your relationship gradually began to change. He was originally the boy you looked up to in the dojo, and eventually he became a big baby that you had to babysit.
Alright, this is the last one you're getting today. Got it? No more after this. Yes, I got it.
Mikey chirped. His eyes sparkled, for he knew you were about to do the thing. Okay, now... You waved your hand in his face. Empty, right? I got nothing in my hands. He nodded profusely. Then, you showed him the handkerchief, front and back. Nothing here either. He nodded again. Then, you placed the handkerchief over your right hand. Blow! He bent over and blew on the handkerchief with a hard, short breath, like you would a birthday candle. You jerked the handkerchief off your hand, revealing a pack of dorayaki the size of your palm.
짜잔! Wow! 수게! As expected of my cupcake!
Mikey started calling you Cupcake since 5th grade. Originally, it started off as a teasing joke when your dad accidentally called you that when he came to pick you up from the dojo. You didn't want your friends knowing that your dad called you these embarrassing pet names like Cupcake, Peanuts, and Sugar Cube, because after Baji and Mikey heard your dad call you that, they started laughing so hard and calling you Cupcake just to tease you. Every time they did that, your face would turn beet red and you chased them all around the dojo. Baji eventually stopped calling you that as the joke got old, but Mikey never stopped. Now, it became a nickname that only he uses. Mikey grabbed the dorayaki from your hands, grinning contently at you. You ruffled his hair as you thought to yourself how cute he is. Then, Draken cleared his throat.
If you're done flirting, can we go now? Mitsuya and the others are waiting.
Well, we're not flirting! Ken-chan no baka! Mikey, be careful! They have a gun!
Sanzu shouted as you trotted closer and closer to Mikey. Blood gushed out of your mouth as 4 more bullets planted into your back. The gun in your hand dropped to the ground, and you paused in place. It was getting harder to breathe. Your vision started to blur, but you looked up at Mikey and smiled. Mikey stared at you as you raised your hand up in the air. Empty, right? His eyes widened. You reached into the inner pocket of your jacket.
Mikey, be careful!
Kisaki shouted, fearing that you would pull out a gun.
Shut up!
Mikey shouted at them.
Nobody move!
You pulled out a handkerchief, placing it over your palm. Blow. Mikey slowly walked up to you, gently blowing over the handkerchief. Your left hand trembled weakly as you tugged the piece of cloth off your right hand, revealing a small pack of dorayaki, the same brand he always loved as a kid. This brand got harder and harder to find over the years, but you always went out of your way to buy them. And out of habit, you always carried them around. You smiled at Mikey. Your voice was barely a whisper. Mikey stared at the dorayaki in your hand. He hasn't seen this brand in ages. Sanzu always told him that this brand was no longer around, and they always bought him those expensive, rip-off brands that are said to be healthier. However, the taste is just not the same. You waited for him to take the dorayaki from you, but he just stood there, staring at it. Your legs were losing strength, and your vision was starting to turn black. With the last strength you had, you pressed the dorayaki to his chest. I'm sorry, Mikey. He placed his hand over yours, holding the dorayaki in place as your hand began to slip. With a thud, you fell to the ground, laying in a pool of blood. There was a ringing sound in Mikey's ears. His breath staggered, and his hands began to tremble. Memories of you flooded in his head as he looked down at the dorayaki. He tore open the packaging with his shaking hands. Everyone stared at Mikey in shock as he shoved the palm-sized red bean snack into his mouth. It was dry, but it tasted like nostalgia. The more he chewed, the more vivid the memories became. He remembered when the two of you sat on the floor at the dojo in the summer, eating watermelons. He remembered when you burst out crying when he put a fake snake in your desk back in 3rd grade. He remembered when you took on a group of high schoolers all on your own back in middle school just because you overheard them talk shit about him. He remembered the first kiss you shared with him at the side of Tokyo Bay.
I promise I'll never leave you.
He remembered that time the two of you undressed at a KTV, but stopped before you could go all the way because you got scared.
Mikey.
As all the memories replayed in his head, his cold, frozen heart started beating again. Droplets of tears started rolling down his cheeks, and soon it was a stream. Hey, Cupcake. I ran out. Do you have any more? He asked. Then, as if only just realizing something, he looked down and his eyes widened. Cupcake? He bent down, gently shaking your limp body. Hey, Cupcake, don't sleep here. You'll catch a cold. The other gang members stared at Mikey in shock and horror. What is he saying? Can't he tell that you're already dead? Cupcake, I want another dorayaki. Can you do the thing?
Quick! Mikey wants a dorayaki! Someone go buy him one!
Sanzu shouted in panic. This wasn't like Mikey. Is Mikey going crazy?
I'll go right away!
One of the mafia said as he ran out of the building. Hey, Cupcake, wake up. Cupcake? Mikey picked you up from the ground, holding you to his arms as he put your head to his chest. Then, as if just noticing the blood oozing out of your back, he muttered, You're shot. Who shot you? He looked up at Sanzu. The pink-haired man gasped as he backed up in fear. The darkened expression and bloodthirsty eyes on Mikey's face sent chills running down his spine. Sanzu's legs trembled in fear as Mikey asked, Who shot my Cupcake? Mikey, Kisaki uttered. Call an ambulance. What?
I said call an ambulance!
Mikey screamed. Mikey, they're dead. Kisaki choked out. Dead? Mikey looked down at you. They're not dead. Cupcake is just asleep. Right, Cupcake? He took your hand in his and brought it up to his face so your hand cupped his cheek. He loved it back then when you did that. However, this time, there was no warmth to your hand. You came back to me, Cupcake. You finally came back. This time, you won't leave again, right? His grip on your hand loosened, and your hand slipped right down his cheek, flopping down to the ground. Cupcake. Cupcake, please. Don't leave me. He hugged you tightly, tears dripping onto your face. You were the last. You were the last person in this world he cared about. In the past years, he did blame you. He blamed you for leaving. He blamed you for breaking your promise. However, deep down somewhere, he was glad you left. As people close to him started disappearing one by one, he began to wonder if that's how it was meant to be. He was scared that if you stayed by him, that you too would one day end up dead as well, just like Draken and Baji. Even though you left him, at least you were alive. Deep down, perhaps it was that tiny bit of hope and relief inside him that kept him going all these years. After all, Tolman is far from the way he envisioned back then, and everyone he cared about is dead. Just what is he living for? He picked up the gun laying in your blood and pointed it at Sanzu.
Mikey!
Sanzu pleaded. My Cupcake isn't here anymore, Mikey muttered. His fingers started tightening around the trigger. Sanzu wanted to run, but his legs were limp. Just when he thought Mikey would shoot him, the blonde mafia boss pointed the muzzle to his own head and pulled the trigger. You gasped as your eyes burst open. You felt something warm and wet slide down the edges of your eyes. Huh? The sky was blue, and the air felt hot on your skin. The sound of cicadas chirping echoed in your surroundings. The leaves on the trees above you waved back and forth gently in the light breeze. Where am I?
Hey, Cupcake! You awake?
A familiar voice chirped as the face in your memories suddenly popped into your vision. It was Mikey. The exact same Mikey you remembered. Shoulder-length blonde hair with bangs tied back out of his eyes. He had the same cheeky grin on his face. Mikey? You couldn't believe your eyes, because Mikey was wearing his middle school uniform, baggy black pants, a white button-up shirt, and the black gakuran draped over his shoulders.
Are you crying? Did you have a bad dream or something?
Your eyes widened as you shot up from where you laid, turning your head to the source of that voice. Tears poured out of your eyes when you saw the boy standing behind you. Kiske.
Wait, are you seriously crying?
Baji gasped.
Baji! You made Cupcake cry!
Mikey shouted.
I didn't do anything!
Baji and Mikey immediately started bickering, and soon they got all handsy, pulling each other's hair and tugging each other's cheeks as they argued over who made you cry. You stood up, eyes panning around, taking in your surroundings. The Musashi Temple, the Tokyo Manji gang often gathered here back in middle school. But why were you here? What am I doing here? You muttered.
Huh? What are you talking about? You fell asleep on the bench here, remember?
Baji retorted. I fell asleep?
Yeah, you were tossing and turning in your sleep. Did you have a bad dream or something? Mikey asked.
A dream? Was that all a dream? No, it was too long, too real to be a dream. Perhaps this right here, this is the dream. Is this the afterlife? Sounds of footsteps interrupted your thoughts.
Oh, Mikey, you're here early for once.
You turned to your right, and there they were. Ken-chan, Mitsuya, Pachin, Peian. Your lips quivered as your voice trembled. You suddenly slapped yourself across the face with the force of a whiplash. Everyone gasped.
What the fuck are you doing?
Mitsuya demanded.
Are you fucking out of your mind?
Draken ran up to you to examine your face.
Cupcake, what did you do that for? Oh my god!
Peian clasped his hands over his mouth.
What the crap? Why did you just slap yourself?
Asked Pachin.
Did you fry your brain in the summer heat?
Baji asked. It hurts, you muttered.
Well, no shit, your face is all red, Draken shouted. Why'd you hit yourself so hard? Don't you know you have monster strength? Hey, Mitsuya, can you go to the convenience store to get some ice? I think this might swell. Yeah, I'll go right now.
It hurts. You started chuckling. It's not a dream. Mitsuya stopped in his tracks, eyes widened with horror and confusion. Why were you laughing?
Hey, I think they finally lost their mind,
Baji said as he twirled his index finger around his temple.
It hurts.
Tears of joy started streaming down your cheeks. This isn't a dream. They're real. This is real. Everyone here is alive.
Cupcake, are you okay?
Mikey asked worriedly, brows knitted, your arms thrown around him, laughing and crying at the same time.
Oi, they're starting to scare me,
Pachin muttered. You laughed loudly. You let go of Mikey and scanned everyone around you. They're here. All of them. Your best friends. You can start over. This time, you won't make the same mistakes again. God gave you a chance to set everything right.
私、みんなを守るから、約束する。
They were all shocked and confused, worried about your strange behavior. But there was a warmth that spread in their chest when they heard your words, for they could tell you were sincere.
What are you saying, idiot?
Baji demanded.
Who's protecting who?
You ignored his remark and turned to Mikey. You grabbed Mikey's hands in yours, your eyes softening at his confused expression.
I'll never leave your side, Mikey. I'll always be with you.
Oh.
Pink dusted his cheeks and sweat built in his hands. Mikey's heart skipped a few beats at the sight of your cute smile.
Ugh, disgusting. Why are you getting all sappy all of a sudden?
Baji asked.
That's because I love you guys so much.
All of them blushed. As adolescents, none of them were very verbal with their feelings, so it was rare for them to hear words like this. But it undeniably made them happy and touched on the inside. This time, you'll make sure that nobody dies. You'll set Tokyo Manji Gang on the right path.